Hello, everyone. To those joining from Dublin and Europe, good afternoon, and to those from the US, good morning. Welcome to our virtual Meet the Team event today with leaders from Pinterest Engineering. My name is Orna Tulin, and I lead our vendor security program at Pinterest. I work remotely from Dublin with Pinterest security team that is based out of San Francisco. Today, we'll meet with a panel of key tech leaders at Pinterest to hear about the cool things our engineering teams are building, what technologies we use, and our plans to grow the Dublin office. Pinterest's mission is to inspire people to create the life they love. And with 433 million global monthly active users and billions of searches every month, we are definitely doing that. When you think of a visual platform like Pinterest, engineering may not be the first thing that comes to mind, but it underpins everything we do and is at the core of what makes Pinterest innovative, inspiring, and inviting to users. I joined Pinterest because I was excited to work in tech with hardworking people who are fun, down to earth, and clever. 2.5 years later, I still feel that way, thankfully. Let's now get introduced to our panel for today. We have 2 folks joining from Dublin and 2 folks from the US. Keith, as the founding member of the Dublin engineering team, let's start with you, please.
Thanks, Orna. Hi, everyone. I'm Keith Regier. I'm the data privacy engineering manager here in the Dublin office. I've been with Pinterest since October of 2016, and I've been here in the Dublin office since February of 2020. Barry, why don't you go next?
Thanks, Keith. My name's Barry. I'm newer, so I'm only here 7 months. I'm the engineering manager for the growth platform team, which is mainly based in Dublin, but we do have some colleagues in San Francisco as well. Cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Barry.
To you, Dave.
Hello, my name is Dave Burgess. I've been with Pinterest for almost 3.5 years. I head up data engineering here at Pinterest. Originally, you can probably guess my accent's from Scotland, and then I migrated across to the Bay Area in California. So welcome, everyone. And next up, Andy.
Hello, everybody. I'm Andy Stangerville. I'm the Chief Security Officer at Pinterest. I've been here 3.5 years, and I still enjoy it as much as when I first started, and excited to tell you about some of the things we're working on.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for those great introductions. Dave, we're going to start this panel off with a question for yourself, please. And this is, where is Pinterest going?
Yes, so Pinterest is the home of inspiration, and we want our users, who we affectionately call pinners, to feel inspired when they come to Pinterest. And they do. So today, like 8 out of 10 people that come to Pinterest actually feel better and feel inspired after being on our platform. We want people to go from inspiration to realization so they can make their dreams a reality in their lives. And for this, we're building the capability to shop on Pinterest. We also make money through advertising and are a profitable business with more than, well, I think it's about 3 billion in the bank now. And we have many interesting technical challenges in data security, growing our user base, and there are many opportunities to learn. So we'd love people to come and work at Pinterest.
Amazing. And I completely agree with you about it being a positive place in terms of the internet. And I think that's what allows us to, attract so many people here to us, especially as a potential employer. So for everyone here on the panel, a burning question, I think, and especially for those listening, is why did you join Pinterest? And we are going to start off with Keith again.
Thanks, Orna. I think for me, the big thing was I was really looking to have a bigger impact. Before Pinterest, I worked for Microsoft for 16 years. I spent the last 8 years rendering the search results page for Bing. It starts off with really big features and lots of innovation, but over time, the project gets a lot more polished and more refined, and you start making smaller and smaller and more nuanced changes. And I was really looking to do something that got back to that sort of big scale innovation. And I think Pinterest was attractive for 3 reasons for me. One is there's a lot of really big challenges pretty much everywhere you go in Pinterest. I've actually worked on something like 5 major different projects here in Pinterest. Every one of them had really big opportunities to make a difference. 2 is flexibility. Culturally speaking, like it's a really easy place for you to contribute code to different code bases. I've actually landed code in almost all of Pinterest repos myself. And the 3rd one is we've got a lot of really talented, inspirational engineers here that you can learn from when you're jumping into all these unfamiliar code bases and doing a bunch of stuff you've never done before. It's awesome to have someone there who can really challenge you and raise you to the next level. And we have a lot of great folks here. I've been here for 5 years now, and I'm still learning every day.
Fantastic. Thanks, Keith. And Andy, how about you? Why did you join Pinterest?
So when I joined, I was looking for a CISO job, and a great coach that I had told me, make a list of pros and cons of things you want and don't want. And a lot of what Keith just said really resonated, of innovation and fast pace and ability to make big differences. And I came from a really heavily compliance-oriented place that had a lot of rules around and government rules and regulators and so on. And I was looking to be somewhere where we were sort of the masters of our own destiny, and we had really cool technical challenges to solve. Like, there's nothing like working in a big scale internet business and the kind of volumes, traffic, problems that you only see when you're at this scale. And then the thing I realized after the fact that I didn't know I was looking for, but makes me so happy every day, is the caliber of people I work with. Not every tech company has such a consistently high hiring bar and awesome people to work with who are really technically capable, who you can collaborate with seamlessly. And I didn't know that was what I was looking for, but it's now the thing I sell to lots of people when I tell them what's great about Pinterest, is that fact, is the people that we have.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I suppose if we think about it, like we spend so much time working, well, obviously a lot of us is working virtually now, but you need to be able to enjoy the people that you spend time with, and working with great folks is so important. Barry, how about you? Why did you join Pinterest only 7 months ago?
Absolutely. I'm pretty cagey at the best of times on LinkedIn, but when the hiring manager reached out, I said I'd have a chat. And even in the 30 minutes of talking, I got such a good sense of the culture of Pinterest and what kind of an impact I could make there. And again, I think, like other people have mentioned, I love the idea that we focus on the positive and bringing inspiration to people. And every time I chatted to someone on an interview, I kind of got more inspired, and I said in my own head, I want to work with these people. They're great. And another thing I love about Pinterest engineering in Dublin specifically is, although Pinterest engineering is large worldwide, in Dublin we're starting smaller, and we have a great opportunity to kind of build our own engineering culture. So in a way, it kind of feels like a startup in Pinterest.
Great, thanks, Barry. And Dave, how about you? Why did you join Pinterest?
So actually, at the time, I wasn't looking for a job, but David Chenkin, who's the chief architect here at Pinterest, reached out to me for a beer, as you do, and took me to the bar, and we were chatting away, and he was describing Pinterest and the culture and the mission to bring inspiration to people's lives. And at the end of having a beer, I said, "Oh, God, let me I'll just meet the team just to see what I like." And the team was really, really friendly, collaborative, with a can-do attitude, really great culture, virtually no politics, and we're all building towards a mission to bring inspiration to people's lives. And so the combination of working with great talent in a great culture on a really great mission to help people throughout the world, over 400 million people around the world, was something that really inspired me to want to join, and that's come true. When I joined, the culture was like that, and I've just loved it ever since.
Amazing. So you didn't find Pinterest, Pinterest found you. I love that. So what is each of your team's vision over the next year or so? Dave, how about you? You can start.
So within Dublin, so Keith heads up our data engineering, data privacy engineering in Dublin, and we started growing out the team about 2 years ago. And we really want to grow out Dublin even more. And within Dublin, we're wanting to build the next generation data warehouse for Pinterest. This is a really exciting project. Pinterest has got massive amounts of data, almost an exabyte of data. That's 1,000 petabytes of data. We have more than 300,000 data sets, which is way too many. And what we want to do is create a data warehouse that has 200 to 400 tables that everyone can use throughout the company and be really productive. If you haven't guessed already, Pinterest uses data for everything. Everything. We have run about 1,000 experiments in parallel, constantly doing A/B testing of everything that we're looking at, doing A/B testing of our user interfaces, of all our machine learning algorithms, and we use data to make decisions on everything. And so having a top-notch data warehouse is really, really important. And so we're starting to build this out. We've already started to build out the team for this in Dublin, and really would like to grow out further. Now we also have Barry, who's leading growing out growth, and we have Andy, who's leading an owner leading the security side that we're growing out there. But there's really lots of great opportunities in Dublin.
So cool. Keith, how about you? What's your team's vision over the next year or so?
The data privacy engineering team, our mission is to build services and processes that ensure that data is handled as pinners and partners expect. And really our big focus for the next year or so is really going to be on agility. Because at the end of the day, if you have a secure enough system that you can store data in, you could basically make it private by removing all access to data. But then you couldn't do anything with the data. And then at that point, you wouldn't be able to find all the inspirational pins you expect to find on Pinterest. So building a system that actually allows you to utilize that data while still keeping it safe and secure and retained in the way you expect, that's really the interesting challenge that we're going to be focusing on, is really building that next level of agility on the platforms.
Fantastic. I love the excitement you bring to a topic like privacy. Well, not to say it's not exciting, but hearing that engineering side of it really brings it to life.
It's easy when you're personally vested, right? Everyone cares about privacy.
Yes, very, very true. And Andy, how about you? What is the key project and vision for yourself in security?
Yeah, in the Dublin office, we're actually hiring a team that's going to work closely with Keith on a bunch of the privacy work, but a little bit more on the front end components and the full stack, and how do we work with our users in explaining to people and helping them make good choices so that we can respect those for how we process, store, and use people's data on the system, whether that's their searches or the things that they save and pin on the platform. And then we're also hiring some folks in the application security space to work on product security and making sure that we're delivering safe and secure products for our customers.
Cool. Barry, how about you? What's your team's vision over the next year or so?
Sure. So my team builds internal tools, and whilst typically when you hear internal tools, you don't think that sounds very exciting. Like, we feel that the internal tools should have the same level of kind of end user experience fidelity that we build into our Pinterest app. So we want to keep the amount of power and flexibility that they have, but then we want to kind of wrap everything in this layer of brilliant end user experience, because we are trying to build tools that allow others to create growth, and helping them to actually enjoy using our internal tools is a big step towards that. And we also handle localization platform in our team, and our vision there is to build a Pinterest that is kind of equal and welcome for everybody by allowing you to use Pinterest in your own language, localized to your own cultural.
I love that last point you just touched on, equal and welcoming to everyone, people on the call may not be aware, but Pinterest has refreshed new values recently, and one of our company values is create belonging. And I just love how what you've just spoken about completely ties back into that. It is something that for us every day here, we need to understand, how are we creating belonging for our pinners, but how are we also creating belonging for ourselves within our teams? So that's fantastic. To the participants on the call, just a quick reminder that we do have a Q&A option within the Zoom functionality. So if you go down the bottom, you're going to see Q&A. So I would encourage, if you have a question for the panelists, which we will be getting to in a couple of minutes later on, to go through some Q&A questions, that you have the option to put them in there. Likewise, you have the option to upvote those questions. So if someone else on the call has stolen your great question, then at least you can upvote it, and I'll make sure that I can call that out then to the panelists later on. So just to bear that in mind. Amazing. So we've spoken a little bit about culture at Pinterest. We talked about why ourselves as panelists, why we decided to join, what we're working on. I want to dive in a little bit more into some more details. So this question is going to be for all of you on the panel, and it's really for us as, I guess, participants to understand, like, what are some of the cool things that you can work on in Pinterest? So what are the key projects in Dublin and some of the hardest challenges or most exciting experiences on each team at the moment? Keith, how about you?
Sorry, reaching for my mute button. Sure, thanks, Orna. So for us, the big challenge in data privacy is really just the scale that Pinterest operates as. And you heard a little bit from Dave earlier. The easy way to sort of illustrate this is to talk about some of the projects. So like one of our big projects that we focus on is user data deletion. GDPR gives you the right to go to any website that you're using and request that they list off all the data they've collected on you, and then you can delete it if you choose. And so at any point in time, a user can go to Pinterest and say, hey, delete all of my data. Deleting that data is already an interesting challenge in its own right, but deleting that data for a few users out of hundreds of millions of users with billions of pins among petabytes of data spread across the data lake presents a lot of really unique technical challenges, and it takes a lot of work to build those systems and bring them together. There's another project that sort of ties in with that. We call it fine-grained access control internally, but deleting the user's data when they request it ensures that you know where the data is, so that you know that when you've deleted all of it. Fine-grained access control gives us the ability to go through and put role-based access control on the data itself. To build the system, we actually had to plug into literally a dozen different data engineering platforms, all of the things you've probably heard of before, like Hadoop and Spark and Presto and Airflow. All of those big systems, data engineering in Pinterest hosts internally, and we had to build and customize solutions in that space. And the last project is something we call data lineage. In the big data systems, it's very common for someone to take, say, two pieces of data that we've ingested from, say, log sources, join some of that data together, cut a little bit of it out, and produce a third data set. And then that third data set gets joined to another one, produces a fourth. And eventually this continues on until you produce things like a model that is used to recommend the pins back to users. We call all of that chain of data custody there lineage, and Pinterest data lineage is so complicated that no one human being can possibly understand it. And so we do is we build a system that can analyze all of those interactions and build out a graph, so that at any point in time you can go and look at it and see, how is this data being used? What's downstream from here? How do I control how my data is being used? So all of those challenges are really tough problems to solve, but they're especially tough problems in the space where there's so much data and there's so many systems to control.
Wow, no wonder we're hiring. Barry, how about you? What are some of the key projects that you are working on in Dublin and some of those hardest challenges that you're facing?
Sure. So in localization platform, one area that we're looking at a lot at the moment is how can we use machine translation? And we're looking at that in a few different ways. So one thing we can do is we can increase the velocity for our own engineers, because any engineer in Pinterest who adds a string of text to the app or any app surface is going to use our translation platform at some point. So one thing which is a common ask is that, when we're waiting for translations to come back from the actual translators, how do we know what it's going to look like? So we've started to use a Microsoft machine translation engine, and that will kind of, when people are running their development environments, it will kick in and automatically give them a translation even before the actual translation is ready. Another application of machine learning that we can do is that we can lower the cost of adding new languages, which leads into that creating belonging and adding more people. So we can say, okay, let's apply this our models, and then later on we can maybe tweak them with the human translator, and that ends up being very more cost effective. And then maybe the final thing on machine translation for localization is that we did a lot of work to identify what strings we thought was like 99.9% unused. And there was quite a lot, actually. And this happens, over time. It's like software entropy. So we decided to use machine translation to translate those. We're confident they're not shown, but even if they are, they will be there as a translation. Another big thing we're doing in localization is to refresh our open source translation system called Mojito. And it's always fun to get the chance to rebuild something with modern tech. And then the other kind of two things that we do in the team are what we call the experience framework and Pinner communications platform. So both of these tools were originally designed for kind of technical users, and they're very powerful, but their interfaces might resemble something like you would see in an Apollo spacecraft. They're not exactly easy to use. So we want to kind of go talk to our users, learn what they want, and to build like great end user experiences for the internal tools, just like we would external. And we want to make it available to non-technical users to use this in order to drive growth in Pinterest and to reach more people, and keep the amount of productivity and power that they can otherwise, but wrap it up in a nice user experience.
Wow, that's really, really cool. Thank you so much. You say Mojito, and now I'm just like, it's 25 plus 4, it's a bit early, isn't it? 5 o'clock somewhere.
It is.
Andy, how about you? What are our key projects in Dublin related to security, and maybe some of the hardest challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, so what Keith said about how hard it is to do some of the privacy stuff is exactly right about at the scale that we're doing it. And some of the stuff we're investing in by hiring more privacy engineers to be dedicated to some of this end to end as well is to hopefully long term make Keith's job even easier and everybody else even more productive. Which if we can find ways to change the data we collect, or change how we store and process that data in ways that are privacy preserving up front, so that we still get all the analytical power out of it, but we tweak it in a way that is also more privacy preserving, so that we don't have to have as many access controls on it, then we get the best of both worlds. We can actually have really great privacy controls by anonymizing data and stripping out certain characteristics of it, and yet still make sure we give you the great experience, give the users a great experience. Our pinners want to see the right content they're interested in. So if we can find ways to adjust the data in various bits of our pipeline full end to end, then we've got some really great opportunities to then not have to worry as much about where some of that data goes, and not have to worry as much about the access control. So today, like you have to do all of those things. In the future, wouldn't it be great if we could tweak some of that data in with? I'm not sure if it's possible. It's pretty cutting edge stuff in some cases around differential privacy and so on. But our hope as a company is to do some of that, to harness those techniques, to then still operate at scale, but with more safety and even more velocity. On the application security side, it's about, just like with privacy by design, putting more security controls into the development process so that we're actually looking at it end to end, catching things early, helping product managers and engineers think about this holistically from the start of a project all the way through to design and implementation, to make sure that we're delivering safe and secure applications.
Fantastic. Thanks for that overview, Andy. So obviously, some folks here on the team, or sorry, on the call might be wondering, what is it actually like working in Dublin, and what's the difference, let's say, between engineering in Dublin and engineering in the US? So this next question, Barry, is for yourself. Pinterest has a lot of engineers, obviously, around the world. We have teams in Dublin, the US, Toronto, Mexico, and in terms of work-life balance, or maybe the impact of work-life balance, what's it like for engineers in Dublin?
Sure, thanks, Orna. So, work-life balance is key. It's the only way that we can, facilitate sustainable, engineering and delivering product. So I will say that there is an impact on the engineers in Dublin, with working with SF, but there's also an impact on engineers in SF working with Dublin. So I'll try to focus on the impacts, but in the Q&A later on, like I'm happy to talk about some of the kind of solutions and tips and tricks. So I think one of the biggest impacts we have is that there's like a key time of day, which in Dublin time zone is between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m., where we have to be available because they're the key crossover hours. Now, they're the ideal ones where we'll handle all of our cross time zone collaboration. And like, it's key to us that we try to fit in as much as possible in that. So, we have to bear in mind that, it's tricky because it's the end of the day for us, and, people in Dublin are kind of tired, and sometimes it's difficult to get into like meaty topics with our colleagues in America. But, I think, because the earlier part of the day is mostly free for focus time, I think it's great because, you get a balance of, a lot of uninterrupted focus time in the morning. And then, of course, there's some collaboration time between 4 to 6. And like occasionally there will be times where we need to hop on something later at night, like such as like sometimes you have a meeting at 8 p.m. Like what I'll do as a manager is I'll say, if you have a meeting at 8 p.m. one night, I'll want you to, take that time the next day and make sure that you have a good balance in your life, because I don't want you to have to do that and then, your regular day the next time. So we also, when it comes to on call, we don't want to wake up people if at all possible. And you would think that if, engineering is in Dublin, we might have to wake up at awkward hours because most of our usage is in the kind of Pacific time zone. And that's when maybe most of the incidents will happen. But what we can do in this case is that we can build automations to try and figure out what the user requests are coming in, whether they're actually important or not. We can even look at like using some machine learning and like an answer bot type system where we can automatically answer people. But I think the key point here is that we can also distribute kind of whether it's full-time or contracting engineering people, and we can have them in a couple of different time zones to try and make sure that people are on call, mostly in their working hours rather than, needing to be on call in the evening and, in the nighttime. And I think lastly, one thing which will help us is that now that the world is opening up a little bit, post the worst of COVID, we can try and improve, our relationships with our colleagues in the in other time zones, and we have the opportunities to travel to different offices and to kind of build those relationships. And I think that also helps kind of work-life balance as you get to know people better, and maybe you get a chance to kind of explore some of the other regions that we're in.
Thanks, Barry. Yeah, all of that fully resonates with me. I suppose it's as you're kind of saying, like it is obviously learning as well, like trying to figure out what works best for your teams. There isn't like a script you can follow on these sort of things. I know for myself, like reporting into Andy, he's in San Francisco, and like when I joined, like team meetings, some of them had to be switched around to be like a more friendly time zone to accommodate me being in Ireland. But like now it's just part and parcel. And if anything, I find that like folks are super respectful of my time. Like they'll get up early in San Francisco or wherever they're based in the US to accommodate me and allowing for like appropriate times for meetings. And obviously you're going to have times when you might have to hop on a last minute call if something's urgent, but for the most part you can kind of rely on those out of hours options. Also on a Friday evening, for me it's like Friday morning, so I feel like I've gained a day and I'm starting my weekend before everyone else, so it makes me I can feel a little bit smug when that happens at least. So one of the main reasons I'm guessing why folks are actually joining today is to learn more about what we're actually hiring for here in Dublin. So actually interesting, myself and Keith were having a little chat before this meeting earlier on, and you're saying how far the team has come. Keith, as I mentioned, was one of the founding members of the Dublin engineering team, which was January 2020, if I'm not wrong. I think, or maybe it was a little bit earlier than that, Keith, when you kind of started out the team, and obviously I joined in January then. But to think that it's grown from roughly like 2 people then to, I think you said we have at the moment about 15 engineers here in Dublin. We have 12 open roles and we have 5 that have accepted offers that are joining. So over the next couple of months, we're going to have roughly about like 32 people, I guess, in Dublin, which is just phenomenal in terms of growth over the last 2 years, which is really, really exciting. And with that in mind, can we talk a little bit about the open roles that we have at the moment, please? So Dave, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, please.
Sure. So in the data warehouse world in business intelligence, where we're building the next generation data warehouse, this team is going to be about 10 people altogether. And we will be looking for anyone from like engineering skills with Spark and Spark SQL, Presto, and Iceberg. You don't necessarily need to have these skills today, but knowing Java, Scala is a plus, is really helpful. And you'll be learning all these new open source technologies if you don't know them already. We're also looking for data analysts, people that can do data modeling, and full stack engineers as well that can build a user interface as well as the full stack to interact with our data warehouse. So really looking forward to building this next gen data warehouse that's going to be owned in Dublin. So the team in Dublin is going to own this and be responsible for this. And we're looking for a variety of skills to fill these positions.
Thanks, Dave. Keith, how about you? What roles are open at the moment?
On the data privacy engineering team, we're really looking for a senior technical lead to come in. As I mentioned earlier, we have a ton of big projects and 3 major projects with whole cross-company impact that touch almost every engineer at Pinterest. We really need somebody to come in and start bringing a lot of leadership in this space. Our projects are kind of unique. They end up building, we own a set of services we build that are the core parts of the platform. We have to partner with data engineering teams to really dive deep into each of the data platforms we were talking about earlier to understand how they work and understand the issues with them, and from a privacy and security perspective. And then we have to spend a bunch of time understanding how people actually build on these platforms to build end-to-end solutions that offer privacy across the spectrum of where the data is being used. And so we're really looking for strong technical leads with really solid coding and debugging and problem solving skills. You're going to be dropping into different languages and code bases, and in front of the stack and the back of the stack, you'll kind of move around a bunch as you get impact in all different areas of the system. You'll get exposure to pretty much all of the code that makes Pinterest run. So if you ever looked at something on Pinterest and wondered, how the heck does that work? You'll get an opportunity to find out. We need people who have technical leadership that can take these big ambiguous projects, steer them on track, build a vision for them, drive them forward, be the person defining the vision, asking questions, but you're also going to be hands-on technically coding and moving a bunch of this stuff on a daily basis. We'd like to see some data engineering experience, but if you have other experience in like big high scale systems, that's also possibly a fit for us. But really at the core, it's going to be someone who's passionate about privacy and who's passionate about really jumping in and learning and absorbing new experiences, because you're going to get a lot of really cool stuff thrown at you in this role.
I can definitely relate to that. I think passion is super important here, and especially like just that eagerness to learn. I think one of the great things about Pinterest, and especially something that started for me when I joined, was, you know, knowing that you can have an impact not only on your own team, but within other teams as well, or like cross-functionally within Pinterest. So having that passion and drive to keep learning in a role is so important. Andy, what about security roles that are open at the moment? What are we really looking for?
Sure. So the couple of roles that we're hiring for are, one, as we're building out our privacy engineering team that's focused a little bit more full stack and front end. We're looking for full stack engineers to help with building some of the user centric privacy features, our help center and our privacy center, user choices around those, and collaborating then with the mobile engineers and other platform teams and implementing those full stack. So previously we just borrowed engineers to do that. And now what we're doing is creating a dedicated team to own those and own privacy as a real product feature rather than as a thing we spin up and spin down. And we're also hiring an AppSec person, and that person we're looking for a pretty senior application security person who knows a bunch of application security technology, how to do maybe not some mix of pen testing and secure design principles, secure coding practices, triaging issues, and so on.
Cool. Privacy is a product feature. I think that is so important because it really speaks to, you know, where we're going as a product in terms of like the emphasis we're putting on privacy as well. So I think that's fantastic. Barry, what about your open roles?
Sure, thanks, Orna. In growth platform team, we're largely looking for full stack engineers, and we're looking for people with various ranges of experience. And so think about, like, if you have 2+ years of experience, that's what we're looking for. But, of course, depending on the applicant, it could be a little bit different. So full stack to us means like a mixture of mainly kind of Python and Java on the back end, and then on the front end, you're talking about like React. But, as a part of the growth platform team, you also do a lot of different things. So you will own a feature end to end typically, and that could involve, also doing a bit of iOS and Android. So that's kind of cool too. So I think primarily either kind of two large profiles. Either you're a full stack engineer and you want to apply, or we'll also think about if you're a iOS engineer who wants to transition to full stack, like we're definitely up for chatting to you as well. We're also looking for somebody who thrives in a very kind of product based team, and you'll enjoy working with cross-functional partners and product management. Like yesterday we did a design sprint, which was really cool. So that should be the kind of thing that gives you energy, that you want to see the tools being used and the impact that it has on people.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you to everyone there for that detail. I think it's probably important and helpful to folks listening, because I don't know about you, but the amount of job descriptions I've read in my lifetime, well, lifetime, that makes it sound like I've been around for years, is mind-boggling in terms of how you can read them and go, I actually have no idea what they want. I don't know what they're hiring for. And maybe it's down to people not putting enough time into what they're actually looking for, but having a little bit more detail from you all in terms of hiring managers is really helpful, I think. It's one thing knowing that there's open roles, excuse me, that we are hiring for at Pinterest, but I suppose an important aspect, that something that when someone looks for a new job, is they're looking for their next challenge. They're looking for career growth. They want to make sure that they're joining a company that they can stay with for years, or at least we hope. So with that in mind, what does career growth for an engineering team in Dublin look like? What sort of an engineering impact can teams in Dublin actually have within Pinterest? Andy, let's start with you, please.
My hope is that it's no different. Like, obviously, we haven't had this team for forever, but we've had it long enough now that our expectation is that it's to a large extent it's no different than anywhere else. And so then, like, for Pinterest as an org, like some key things that have, I think, attracted engineers to our team and kept them on the team. It's funny, Keith actually reflected on this in one of the things he said to kick us off about his previous roles, and how you were one part of a very large team, perhaps not seeing impact. And so the opportunity to grow and learn is being given meaningful work that's a real stretch and challenge, and having ownership on it, and not just being task oriented and being told to do this thing or that thing, but being given a problem to solve and being given the ownership to go and do that. And so I think that's a big thing that differentiates, at least on my teams, where we've taken engineers only a few years out of school, and sometimes a year out of school, and we give them real big, meaningful projects where after a few years, you own something, or you can end up owning something really big and meaningful, like a key piece of the actual product and site. In our case, a key piece of security technology where you're the person who owns, like, go figure out how to solve this problem, design, build, implement the solution to this thing as somebody with a few years of experience. And you don't do it alone, like with no help and support, but you've given a lot of autonomy to learn and grow, and you learn by doing and by having a hard problem that you try to solve with the support of your colleagues. So that's my expectation on my team, is we give people big challenges like that. There's a lot of things we haven't solved yet. I think you've heard them all here. We give people those big challenges and the freedom and flexibility and the support from their colleagues to go solve them. And my expectation is that's the exact same thing that's going to happen with the engineers I'm hiring in Dublin as the engineers I've hired anywhere.
Thanks so much, Andy. I suppose I can attest to being a member of the security team and getting that support. Certainly within security, I know when I started that people were just like so open in terms of offering help if I needed help with something, and I think that's particularly important because it can be pretty daunting starting a new job, and maybe some people can be reluctant to ask for that help, but having people be openly approachable for that is so important and allows you to be successful, definitely from the beginning. Keith, What about you? Like, how do you think we can have impact on folks' careers when they're based in Dublin as engineers?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, because I think when you think about remote offices, you often think, oh, they're going to get sideline projects, and it's maybe going to be hard to go and influence a bunch of engineers in another country. And I think data privacy teams kind of have the luxury of establishing and actually seeing if this worked over the last 2 years. And so the fine-grained access control project, I feel, is like a great example of us showing that you actually can have really big leadership impact here. The data privacy team started here in Dublin pretty much from the beginning. The fine-grained access control project came to us, and we kind of looked at it. Everyone didn't really understand what it was. We spent a lot of time early on leading conversations and discussions, scoping the project, figuring out what it would be, diving deep into the technology with a bunch of different teams on data engineering and figuring out what we needed to solve in this space. It started off really with just 2 of us engineers here in Dublin, but our actual virtual team that was sitting there on our stand-ups, whenever we were meeting twice a week, that was about a dozen of us. And so already we were using a lot of resources around the company, many of those folks in San Francisco, and we would be swapping diffs back and forth with each other. We had a good 18 hours in a day where we were coding and overlapping with each other. Well, not overlapping for all of it, but coding back and forth and swapping diffs back and forth. And by the time we were done, it took us 60 people to build this project successfully to completion. And now we have even hundreds more engineers that are onboarded and using this. In fact, I think last I looked, there were about 400 people using the platform at the current point. So it's a ton of impact from a project that was built and owned here. And the process, I think the thing I'm most proud of is we actually became the real owners of data privacy. People who have questions about privacy and data or any of the platforms, they automatically come to us first. They don't go to somebody in San Francisco who then sends them over to us. They just come straight to our doorstep. It's really established ownership at that point.
That's fantastic. And ownership, it was you led that project, is that correct?
Yeah, this was actually Connell and I building this in the early days over here on the Dublin side.
Amazing, that's fantastic. Dave, what do you think about our options for career growth for engineering in Dublin?
Yeah, so plus one to what Keith has said. I mean, I'd just take Keith as an example here. We started fine-grained access control 2 years ago from scratch. And Keith led this project with a virtual team spread across the US and Ireland. And anything that Keith asked for, he got, in terms of do you want, who do you want on this project? And like you said, at some point, probably about 50 people were working on this project. We got fine-grained access control throughout our data systems now as a result of the team in Ireland and Dublin. And Keith was promoted as well. So to a level that usually requires 30 people to report to, but because of his great work and because of to manage a virtual team of such a large size and making such a big impact, of course we wanted to promote Keith. And so there's plenty of opportunities for career growth within Ireland, within Dublin, plenty of opportunities to get promotion and make a huge impact. And don't forget, Pinterest is got 400 million users. We've got just a really phenomenal technology to learn at a big scale, and so you're going to get a lot of experience as well by working at Pinterest.
The Keith Appreciation Day. That is it's obviously great to hear that, and to hear a leader like yourself, Dave, to kind of be emphasizing that point as well, I think is so important to people. It's one thing if it was just us here as the folks in Dublin saying it, but then to have yourself and Andy on the call kind of emphasizing that as well, obviously, makes that point even clearer to people as well. So we're going to move into a bit of Q&A. I think is our good, it's a good time. We have some cool questions in the Q&A chat at the moment. And we have some other ones that have been sent through as well. So one that I want to begin with actually is kind of, especially given that we're all joining, well, most of us are joining remotely. Some might be in an office right now, but we're still remote. And it's to really understand, as life returns to normal after COVID, how are things changing for Pinterest engineers? Dave, if you wouldn't mind taking that.
Sure. So we're actually gradually coming back to the office, but it's really, really flexible. So we have a program called PinFlex. Most, as you can imagine, most things at Pinterest start with the word pin. And PinFlex is really having a flexible way of working so that you can choose where you want to work. With data engineering and the foundation teams, including like Andy's security team and our infrastructure team, we just require people to come to the office 1 week a quarter, really. And that's really for connection and getting together and meeting and kind of riffing on some ideas and also talking about the vision and strategy. And the rest of the time is really up to the team to decide. Some teams want to come in more often, like every week, some every couple of weeks, or just ad hocly. And so it's really what you feel comfortable in this kind of COVID environment. Some people are comfortable coming back to the office, and everyone that in our offices that come back are already vaccinated and don't have the symptoms of COVID, so you feel safe in the office. And some people wear masks, some people don't. But it's really, is one of the great things is the way that we've kind of transitioned to having been required to be in the office kind of all week long as a culture, to now a culture where you get to work where you want. I work some of the time in a cafe, I work some of the time at home, some of the time in the office. I'm in the office at the moment for a good internet connection. And so it's really flexible.
Amazing. Yeah. I think it speaks as well to, I suppose, the trust that we have with our employees as well, because we know that people are going to work hard no matter where they're working from. So we need to be able to give that flexibility to folks. And I think for anyone looking to join, it's definitely something that I think nowadays everyone is looking for, is to have that flexibility. Thank you, Dave. Barry, logistically speaking, can you tell us about the Dublin office? Where is it? What's it like? What's the snack situation like?
Sure. So if you've ever been to Dublin, there's the kind of the Quays area, and we're kind of up towards, if you get as far as the sea as you can, we're almost there. And the whole area is generally known in Ireland as the Silicon Docks, because that's where a lot of the tech companies settle down in Ireland. So there's a lot of cool cafes and places to eat around there. The office itself is really cool. Like, it's kitted out really well. It's a Pinterest office. There's a barista downstairs, which is very important for me because I have a big graw, as they would say in Ireland, for caffeine. And the snack situation is pretty good too. And we have one thing which I loved, which I found out we have a hot buffet for lunch every day, and it's kind of restaurant quality. It's pretty awesome. And it's great. It's a kind of a in an area that's going a lot of regeneration, so that's kind of pretty cool too.
Yeah, there really is. It was bizarre for me going back to the office, having not really been there in 2 years, and seeing like how much buildings have gone up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is odd, but I can definitely say that the snack situation is very, very good. And the food is great too. Another thing I think as well that kind of stands out for me about the Dublin office is just the collegiality, I guess is the word I'm looking for, of it. Like, you could go and sit down and have a coffee with someone from another team. It's not like everyone kind of just sticks to themselves. Like, people are very open and chatty, which I think is really important. Like for me anyway, a lot of the folks I work with are in San Francisco. So like, I'm friendly with everyone on the Dublin engineering team, but day to day, I'm not working with a lot of people in Dublin. So it's nice to be able to be in the office and still have that face-to-face interaction with people, even if you're not directly working with them, which I think does great in terms of like building a rapport with other colleagues in the office as well. We have some great questions coming in on the Q&A at the moment. Let me just have a quick look here. Okay, maybe this is for Andy or Keith. Will recent graduates be considered for the available roles?
Andy, do you want to speak to the security positions?
Yeah, at least one of ours, they're relatively low in experience required, so we don't want to rule that out. You should, there's another question in there about diversity, and so like one of the things I try to do, and many of our hiring managers try to do, is encourage people to apply for our jobs, even if you're not sure you meet every single requirement in the job description. Apply. We want to see your information and consider you for for a position. And so, like, a lot of people think they have to meet every single one of those things and get the top score on every one of those requirements in order to be considered for a role. And it's almost never like that. So we'd love to hear from you and for you to reach out and apply for one of our roles, because even if it's not a match to the existing one, it might be a match to the next one that we post. And so we'd love to hear from you, and not for you to self-select out. Obviously, if you don't meet any of the requirements, sure. But if you're not sure that you meet some of them, or you're on the cusp, apply. Let us hear from you so that we can get you on our radar and consider you for a position.
Just to build on what Andy said, like, we've got 12 open positions right now. Some of them are targeted towards more senior candidates, but a lot of them are going to be accepting of more junior candidates. So come and reach out to us, talk to the recruiters in the Q&A event coming up, and we'll see if we can find a fit for you. Yeah,
+1 to that. I think it's, human nature to look at something and point out what we can't do as opposed to what we can do. And we're probably all victims to imposter syndrome a little bit. I know when I was approached about the role of Pinterest, one of the recruiters reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I remember reading this going, I can't do that job, even though I was basically doing the exact same job somewhere else, but just because of how it was worded, or the description of it. So I would definitely +1 to what Andy just said. Personally, I just hired someone to join my team who's starting late this month, which I'm very excited about. And I know when I was going through resumes for folks that there were certain people who I knew maybe weren't suited to the role, but we kind of saw that maybe they're suited to other roles, or within security and engineering in general. If we see resumes come through that may not be suited to that direct role, we always reach out and let our recruiters know that we think they could be suited to something else. So definitely, please do reach out if you think you meet at least some of the requirements that we're advertising for. Brilliant. There is a question in here about diversity and inclusion, something that I think is very important to all of us and definitely top of mind for Pinterest. So let me just find it one moment. We have, yes, a question from Marie McGuinness is, are you doing anything to encourage diversity in new hires? And Dave, if you could take this, please.
Sure. So diversity has actually been one of the top things that we've been discussing, and not just discussing, but we have goals. We call them objectives and key results, where we actually measure ourselves on diversity at the top of the company level. And we have goals all the way down to my level as well on this. In terms of like Pinterest as a whole, Pinterest is about 50% women overall. And we also look at underrepresented minorities within America, at least. And our goals are to have at least 25% of women in engineering and about 15% underrepresented minorities within engineering. We're actually above those goals at the moment, and so we're going to stretch ourselves to have even higher goals than that. One of the reasons why we do this and have these goals in place is when a team has diverse representation, we end up building a better product as a result. People have different perspectives, different points of views, and by talking about these different perspectives, we end up building something that is better for the community at large. So not just for our pinners, which we want to do, of course, but also internally. And so a lot of the groups here are working internally with other teams. And so by having different perspectives, not just from within the team, but outside of the team, ends up creating something even better result. And if you want to look at the financial results of companies that are more diverse actually end up performing even better financially and have better growth in the stock market. So there are many reasons to have a diverse team. And it's certainly something that is top of mind that we look at and we focus on within Dublin as well as the US.
Thanks, Dave, for that brilliant overview. It's definitely something I think that's top of mind for hiring managers as well. I know, I think with myself and Barry were chatting about this before, that we obviously need to make sure that we have a diverse panel as well, assuming that we have the required candidates coming through. I know that I wouldn't say push back is the wrong word, but definitely ask recruiters, hey, like, do we have other folks that are of diverse backgrounds that I can check their resumes out to see if they're a possible candidate. So it's something that is definitely top of mind for everyone when we're going through the hiring process. There is a good question here from Umar, and apologies, Umar, if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, which is, it would be great if we can shed some light on learning and development programs as well. Thanks. Who would like to take that question up?
I can take that. So every person has a career conversation with their manager on a regular basis. And so one of the things, we actually have a worksheet where you kind of work out, you write out what your career goals are for next year or so, helps you to think through the process. And then, you know, where do you want to go and what kind of, and then chatting with the manager, get to discuss what kind of projects would be best for your career. What would you learn the most on? Because you actually learn the most by doing and being involved in projects with other people. So you're learning along the way. Of course, we have like the training courses. We have many online courses that you can take, and there's always opportunity to do that. And if you want to go to a conference, or if you want to present, or want to go to a workshop, those are all available, of course. And so it's really chatting with your manager and figuring out what's best for you, so that something can be tailored exactly for you. That's what we do.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, we have like so much opportunity, I would say, to progress in that regard. We have subscription to LinkedIn Learning as well, that folks can kind of use for their own training. And then obviously, as you mentioned, the likes of conferences and different training courses that are applicable to roles. I think it's definitely something that I've noticed is like people are very supportive of the likes of like continuous development and training here within Pinterest. Not to say it wasn't the case when I was in other roles, but it's definitely something I've seen here as well, which is fantastic, of course. Let me take a quick look at the Q&A here. Dave, you're a popular man. There's some questions coming in for you, but I'm going to pop along to someone else instead to give someone else a little bit of airtime. Technical question for Barry. Is scale also a factor when delivering translations to the UI?
It is, like particularly for the next generation of translations that we want to build. So right now, if you add a new string into the various app services, iOS, Android, web, MWeb, what my team's tools do is they go along, they'll detect that new translation and mark it, you know, for translation by a human. So then the result will go back into your code during the code review process, and it'll be merged, you know, as a result of that. So it's a little bit like it'll be taken in and then deployed as normal with the rest of your app. However, like to get more flexibility, we're currently looking at delivering like what we call over-the-air OTA translation system, and that'll be way more interesting. Like that'll involve like delivering deltas of like static assets like localization in almost real time, and there'll be very high availability. We'll have to make sure that we're kind of, you know, basically serving, like you heard earlier on, that, you know, we're almost like 500 million monthly active users. So if we are going for an over-the-air translation system, yes, we're going to have to deal with that scale. Right now we don't, but, you know, we're looking forward to that challenge.
Amazing. Thank you, Barry. Keith, I have a question here for you. How does the backend tech stack look like for Pinterest, and what does the software engineer interview process look like?
So I think the tech stack part first. From the tech stack perspective, I think Barry kind of mentioned this on the growth side earlier, but I think I'd just plus one to it. A lot of our work gets done in combinations of Python, JavaScript, and for the UI, JavaScript, TypeScript for UI stuff, and React, and then Java for higher scale backend services. There's a bit of stuff done in C++, usually around really high efficiency services like Envoy traffic routing. not that many people code in C++ on a daily basis. On the backend side of things, like in the data engineering, you're going to be using Java or Scala, and you're going to be using Python as your workflow engine to stitch things together. You'll also probably be doing a lot of data analysis. And so from that perspective, like we use a lot of our rapid analysis we do in Presto. From the rest of the tech stack perspective, like on data engineering, you're going to see pretty much every big data tech stack mechanism you've seen out there. Almost all of it is open source based at some point. We have some systems that are built on top of it that aren't, but like Airflow is our key workflow system for most of our scheduling and operations and coordination between workers. We use Flink, we use Hadoop and Spark and Presto and Druid, and all of these things are like the key big open source techs that you will use for that space. I think regarding the interview process on the engineering side, we typically do a tech screen, and that's going to be a one-on-one with an engineer who will get a little talk to you a little bit about your background, try to look for fit in terms of positions that might be a good match for you across different teams in Pinterest, and then we'll start going through at least like a half hour or so of a coding problem, so you can show your basic coding skills and stuff before we get into a full interview loop. Once you go into interview loop, most of our interview loops have between 1 and 2 coding problem-solving interviews that'll sort of get you going in terms of your creative juices of coding and solving problems out there in the real world. Most of our interview questions are going to focus on questions that are actually problems we have to solve in Pinterest every day. And then you'll see at least probably one architecture question talking about how do you build high scale big systems. Usually the architecture question we focused on the area that you're interviewing in. And then you might have a separate conversation with someone around maybe cross-functional, how do you work across teams and balance requirements across different disciplines, working with PMs or legal or things like that as it might be suitable. And then usually there'll be an interview with a hiring manager in there that's really looking for sort of overall team fit and what sort of role is this person going to play on the team? How are they going to expand the team and challenge them and move them to the next level?
Thanks so much, Keith. Another question here for Dave. And this is from Aaron or Arun. Apologies again if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. How are people handling the data localization issues? Like some governments are asking for data if people belong to that country should reside in that country.
Yeah, so we take data privacy very seriously, as Keith can attest to, and by having several teams around data privacy. And we've been doing a huge amount of work to, of course, be GDPR compliant. Now we're working on getting fine-grained access control across all of our data. And for data localization, we actually have very little PII, personally identifiable information at Pinterest. Most of the data that we have is actually for just seeing how people are using our site so that we can optimize usage and optimize what we show people with our machine learning models. We do have some conversion data, which is advertisers that send their conversion data so that we can actually we can actually calculate the return on ad spend. So there's very little data that we need to localize, and the ones that we will need to localize when governments put in regulations in effect, we will of course do that for those countries. So that's our plan.
Cool, thank you, Dave. I have a question for anyone that wants to answer it, but I might start off with Andy. What makes us different from other tech companies?
Yeah, I think yeah, sure. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, or even more broadly, other companies, shall we say?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about the culture and what it's like to work here and the consistent talent base and so on. I think I think that's definitely different from at least some of my past experiences. And so on is the consistent quality of the folks you work with, and it's just not the same. Not all tech companies are created equal, and so on in that respect. But then the other thing is, like, some of the problems we have are just different. So unless you're at a really large scale internet company, which I haven't spent my whole career in large scale internet companies. When you join one, you realize the kind of problems that you see, or things you thought you knew about. Here, I'll just go solve this problem this way. I'll just go grep the logs. You're not grepping through the logs for for an internet scale business of this size. So when you want to go analyze data and solve a problem, it's very different doing it here than it is at a place that maybe doesn't have such a large internet presence, isn't dealing with so much data. And so the scale and challenges you see from that is phenomenal. I find them fascinating and interesting and really cool problems to deal with, but they're just not like what you see if you're not in a business of this type and scale. So I think they're great. If you haven't had exposure to that, it's really different. You unlearn a lot of things that you thought you knew about what technology will work to solve a problem, because it blows up at the scale that we're at. So, we use a lot of open source, but then we have to make adjustments on top of it to actually make it work at the scale that we're dealing with. So those are some awesome things for my part that I think are really great about the problems we're solving.
Thanks, Andy. Does anyone else want to chime in on that question? What you think makes Pinterest different to other companies?
I think our mission, and that's what really resonated with me, that we were actively trying to make people's lives better. And that's one of the reasons why I joined. And even, only been here for 7 months, but seeing, I know one of the questions in the list is about COVID, but seeing the amount of care that the company put into, taking care of employees during COVID and making sure that they were set up and able to be set up for success at home. I thought that was great. And yeah, I just, I know we talked earlier and I said that, whilst, I've worked in a number of tech companies, I think Pinterest just do everything a little bit better than the ones I've been in before.
There's a good tagline in there. Do a little bit better. Although okay. I suppose, go ahead.
I was going to chime in on the, Barry said he joined, he was talking about the COVID response. And I wanted to reflect, it's one of the prouder moments I have working here about how we treated employees during the situation. I don't know if everybody remembers a little over 2 years ago when COVID hit, there were all these various websites that existed that were about all of the companies that had paused hiring and or were starting to do layoffs as a result of it. And I think you hear about that in the news now as well, with what may be happening globally with and especially in the US with inflation and so on. Pinterest is an amazingly well-run business. And I'm really proud that when COVID hit, we actually decided early as a company, and our management team decided that we were going to try and ride it out without having those big giant boom and bust cycles that a lot of people have had in the tech industry. And so we didn't do layoffs related to COVID. We supported our employees with flexible work plans and leave as they needed it in order to take care of the situation. We didn't do layoffs. We slowed a little bit of our hiring. So not everybody, I think, paused some of their hiring in various times or slowed down a little bit. But we didn't do the whole knee-jerk reaction and layoffs and so on, because we've tended to be run very stably. Our leadership team hasn't been like, and this is maybe what differentiates us from some other internet companies that grow at all costs, is that we haven't had that mentality. And so it's meant that it's a growth curve that's sustainable and so on, but it also means that when there are shocks, we've actually got the correct reserves in place, and we've been running the company responsibly, that we don't have to have those knee-jerk reactions. So I was amazingly proud that during that time, when there's websites with hundreds of tech companies on them that are either killing all their hiring, stopping all of it entirely, or laying people off, that we were on the list as, yeah, we're gonna do a good thing and keep everybody and ride through this storm together. So I was really proud of that. And I think you'll see it today, that there's a lot of tech companies that have stopped their hiring and or are doing layoffs. And we're continuing to hire because we can see the positive aspects of where our business is going, and we're investing to do so.
Yeah, I think you can be rightfully proud of that. Looking back, it was so frustrating at the time to be in that situation for COVID, but obviously everyone was in that same situation. But I remember on the bad days to me, just thinking I don't think there's anything else that Pinterest can be doing to support me. I know like obviously Andy is my manager, and Keith actually, I used to report into Keith in Dublin. So when I started reporting to Keith, so I had the privilege of having two people that I could kind of chat to and work through those issues with. And I remember having a bad day one time and giving out to both of you about it. And you were kind of saying like, what else can I do? I'm like, well, there's nothing else you can do. Like, you just need to solve COVID for me. But obviously that wasn't possible. So I would agree with that. I think that we were very well supported, and I guess it could be frustrating sometimes because you want an office to open, but we were following local guidance, and at the end of the day, just trying to keep folks safe, which is obviously top of mind as well. Let's have another quick look here at next set of Q&A. This is probably a question for one of the recruiters, so I might just call it out, but I think if we could get maybe an insight from our panelists on this, and I think it's also a good one to touch on in the breakout session then afterwards, is people are asking, this anonymous attendee has asked this question, is what's the average response time for an application if you do put one forward? So I suppose, like, how quick are we in terms of hiring, going from reviewing those resumes to going through the interview process? Keith, you've gone through this a lot in terms of growing the team here. Do you want to maybe take a stab at that question?
Sorry, I was typing in a response to another question. So you're talking about sort of overall response time for closing on in the interview loops and things like that?
Yeah, like how fast are we in
actually
terms of
take this one.
Yeah,
go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah, so we're actually we can actually be very fast at going through the whole process. So we can arrange. It's really based on your availability for interviews. So we can like have one set of interviews on a day that's within a week of when you've contacted us, and then make a decision within the next week. And actually, you can have an opportunity to even talk to more than one manager to decide which team you would like to be on. So we can do the whole process within a couple of weeks. Really, there's no constraints on time.
I definitely plus one that. I think I know when I was hiring recently, it's something we kept speaking about, certainly within our security leadership team meeting, was hiring is our number one priority. Every time we met as a team, it was the first thing we spoke about. If we ever needed anything to be unblocked, that was what was always key for us as well. So at the end of the day, I think we want to be respectful of people. A friend of mine was reached out on LinkedIn recently by a company that they had interviewed previously for, and the company got back in touch and was like getting in touch about a new job. And I asked them, oh, what did you say? And they said, well, like, of course I said no. They treated me terribly during that recruitment process before. They dragged it out for ages. I didn't know what was happening. And that's exactly what we don't want here at Pinterest. We kind of have this, I guess, mantra or ethos is, even if you decide the role isn't for you, or we decide maybe that you're not the best fit for this current role, it doesn't mean you won't be a fit for the next role that comes along. So we really want to make sure that the recruitment process is a positive experience for everyone that goes through it. So speed and communication is obviously very key to that as well. An interesting question here, which I think it may be helpful for those that are maybe more junior in their career that may be joining and listening in at the moment, is what advice would you give to candidates who are more junior in their engineering career, be it for the interview process or just maybe in general if they are only beginning their engineering careers? Andy, do you want to take a stab at that from a security perspective?
Yeah, I tend to look at it as sort of a breadth versus a depth approach. Like that, I like to get really good at one thing and then branch out from there. So they're trying to focus on too many things at once, I think, is hard. You can learn a whole bunch of stuff, but be very shallow on them. And then when it comes time to do a detailed coding interview, you don't know any language well enough to take on a complicated challenge. So don't try to learn 6 programming languages all at once. Learn one really well. Because when you come to do an interview here, we don't care which language you pick to solve the problem in. We want you to be fluent in one to be able to solve the technical problem that we put before you, and we don't care which language that is. So it's not a know every language or whatever. It's a know one and use it as a good tool to solve a problem. So that's my first thing is don't focus on getting broad too early. Get deep on one thing, get some core skills really strong or really strongly, and then proceed from there.
I think that'd be very
Just
helpful.
to add to what Andy's saying, at the beginning of your career, and actually throughout, I think some of the attributes that are really important is having a good attitude, being really motivated, and like love what you're doing. Like choose something that you really love, that you want to be working on, because when you're inspired to work on that thing, you'll do great work and you'll enjoy it at the same time, and you want to continue to do it for a long time. So choose something that you really want to do. And then I'd also say, like at the beginning of your career and throughout, is get to know people. So when you join Pinterest, go and have like the 10-15 minutes, like quick coffee chat with each person individually, just to get to know them, and so they can get to know you, and so you can then ask them questions in the future, and so develop those relationships, develop the connections with folk, especially in this era where a lot of us are working virtually now. It's really important to set aside time to do that, and yeah, come and enjoy yourself and have a great time working with the team and learn from lots of different people. So.
Definitely, I think enjoy yourself is so important. It's important that you can have fun at work and ideally have fun with your colleagues as well. And maybe the other side of that coin is like maybe you don't know what you want out of your career, or you're not exactly sure like what you love, or like you don't have this guiding light in terms of your career. I know that was certainly someone like I probably fit into that bucket, and I would maybe say to people in that situation as well is like just trust your instincts. If you think that the people you meet are going to be interesting to work with and you think you're going to learn from them, then maybe that could be your next opportunity. That was another reason for me when I wanted to join here, was just how clever everyone was when I met them, and I was kind of blown away by that. I think if you're going to be in a situation where you're going to learn from people every day, then it's definitely going to be a beneficial move for you. We are approaching, I would say, the end of our Q&A. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who did pop a question in that Q&A basket. Really appreciate it. Sometimes it can be a bit daunting doing that even when it is remote, so thank you so much. Thank you as well to all of our panelists today. It's fantastic to hear, I guess, the excitement around all the roles that we're hiring for is amazing. And as well as that, it's just really interesting and also enthusing to hear about the support that we have from engineering leadership for the Dublin team, how much we're growing, and to see where these teams are growing and where they're leading in terms of the next big steps and challenges for engineering at Pinterest. We do have a breakout starting now, which will be run by our recruitment team, our amazing Pinterest recruitment team. So they can certainly answer some of the more burning questions you have around the hiring process, and they'll be very happy to do so. This breakout room is a separate link, so click in to the chat and you'll see the link posted so that you can join that now in a moment as well. If you don't have time to join the breakout, all I would say is check out our careers page as well, please, which is pinterestcareers.com. I know there was a question in the Q&A there about other roles around marketing and sales. We are hiring like across every vertical within Pinterest at the moment, so definitely check that out too. You might find a role that's even suitable to a friend or anyone else, so please make sure you take a look at that as well. And if you were particularly interested by any area or any person that you heard speaking today, please reach out to us over LinkedIn. We're more than happy to get connected to people and stay in touch with folks. And going back to that point that Dave made as well, that's another way to kind of build your network as well, is like just reach out to people if you kind of listen to them and you think that they're interesting, you can learn from them as well. Don't be afraid to do that, because the worst thing that someone does is they ignore your invitation or they say no. So I would just really encourage that as well. Yeah, so thank you so much again for joining us. We are so delighted that you had the chance to listen in, and hopefully it was of benefit to some people as well. So please tune in for the breakout session too. And I think some of our panelists may also join in that as well for a minute or two as well. So if you have any further questions for the panelists, they'll also be happy to address them there. Thank you so much. Gurmina Malagud.
Thanks, Orna.
On.
Thanks, everyone.